Now let's begin with the Malthusian theory of population growth. I want all of you all to read your text, please, okay? In order to relate with this. I will explain you, but you yourself individually have to go through the text if you really want a clear idea on it, alright? So, the first point, Malthusian theory of population, it is an important theory of demography, okay? So, Malthus has propounded a theory of demography. Thomas Robert Malthus is his full name, in the year 1798 in his essay of Population. So the Malthusian theory is considered to be a pessimistic one. Pessimistic meaning negative. He is very negative, or his opposite of positive, that is negative, regarding the population, regarding his idea of population. So his theory is considered to be a pessimistic one. Next point, according to Malthus, human population grows at a much faster rate in comparison to the means of human subsistence, food, clothing, land, etc. So Malthus, in his theory, states that the rate of growth of human population is much greater than that of the growth of the means of subsistence like food, clothing, agriculture, land, etc. Okay, so what he says is that human population, it grows faster than the things that help them sustain their life. Like human population grows at a much faster rate in comparison to the means of human subsistence like food, clothing, land, etc. Clear, right? So let me repeat once again. He says that human population grows faster than the means of human subsistence. Next point, he held that the human race will always live in poverty as population will always be more than the means of subsistence. Here he is being very pessimistic, very negative, saying that the human race will always be living in poverty. Why? Because population will always be more than the means of subsistence. The human population will always be more than the basic means of subsistence. Then the things that require to sustain human life will always be less than the population. Next point. Human population, according to Malthus, grew in a geometric progression, that is 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and agricultural produce grew in an arithmetic progression, that is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So he says that human population grows faster that is in a geometric progression. It doubles every time. 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16. Whereas agriculture produce, it grows slowly in comparison to the human population, that is it grows in an arithmetic progression, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, etc. Okay, so Malthus states that for the human race to prosper, the population growth should be checked and controlled. So since Malthus has already said that human beings will always be living in poverty because population is extremely more than the means of subsistence, so he says that in order to in so he says that for the human race, for the human population to have a particular standard of living, to be prosperous, the population growth must be controlled, it must be checked. So here in his theory he has talked about two types of checks, that is the positive check of population growth and the preventive check of population growth. So what is preventive check? It includes the actions people take to avoid increase in population. This includes postponing marriage, refusal to marry, practicing sexual abstinence or celibacy. So preventive check includes all the actions that people take on their own according to their wish voluntarily, like delaying the age of marriage or refusing to marry or not accepting to involve oneself in sexual practices. If they do all this, they will not give birth to children. Hence, population will be controlled. So this is what preventive check is. It is the voluntary actions taken by people in order to avoid increase in population. On the other hand, there is positive checks. These are the events that actually naturally does it. It naturally shortens the average lifespan of the humankind, such as disease, warfare, famine, etc. So when there is a disease or a warfare, famine in the world, then people start dying. So eventually the population will be controlled, and all of this happens naturally without the will of people, right? Like the coronavirus, it has been killing so many people. So if Malthus would be alive, he would say that this is one of the positive check that is controlling the population. Alright, so that is happening naturally. So Malthus was a supporter of positive check to population growth. He was of the view that all of the actions that people do voluntarily, which comes under preventive checks, may not take place because people may refuse to do it, may refuse to accept the preventive checks, or they may change their mind later. But the positive checks, which happen naturally, it cannot be controlled by humankind. So Malthus was a supporter of the positive checks. Alright. So there were many criticisms that the Malthusian theory received. That is, people opposed, people tried to falsify, people tried to say that Malthusian theory is not acceptable or it is false because of some reasons. So firstly, the Malthusian theory was criticized by the theorists who were of the view that economic growth exceeded population growth. So there were theorists who were of the view that economic growth, that is economic development of the country, the GDP of the country, it increased, it exceeded, it was greater than the population growth. So these people, they refuted, they were against Malthusian theory because they said that economic growth, the GDP, the wealth of the country was increasing more than the population growth. Secondly, in the European countries, both food production and standards of living continued to rise in spite of the population growth. Sorry, this is population growth, alright. So, at a point of time in the European countries, the food production as well as the standard of living of the people, it began to rise. Okay, it began to get better in spite of the population growth. Although the population was growing, the food production, okay, the standard of living was also increasing altogether. So Malthusian theory was proved wrong because Malthus was of the view that the increase in population increases faster than the food production, okay, the means of sustenance of people, the basic means of subsistence for people will increase at a slower rate as compared to population growth. But at one point in the European country, what happened was food production and standard of living of the people, it continued to rise although there was population growth. So Malthusian theory was proved wrong. Lastly, the liberal and the Marxist scholars also criticized the Malthusian theory, as Malthus stated that poverty was caused by population growth. Malthus had stated that poverty was a result of population growth. As population grew, it resulted in poverty. That was what Malthus had stated. But the liberal and the Marxist scholars were of the view that poverty resulted out of the unequal distribution of resources rather than the population growth. So these people, the liberal and the Marxist scholars, were of the view that no, it's not poverty that resulted out of population growth, but poverty is the result of the unequal distribution of resources. Like resources have been distributed unequally. This is quite true because you can see it in the current, like in the present day scenario as well. The rich are extremely rich, the poor are extremely poor. The wealth is concentrated in the hands of very few people who are very rich, and the rest are poor. So poverty is resulted out of unequal distribution of resources rather than population growth. So here again, the liberal and the Marxist scholars, they criticized Malthus. Alright, so this is about Malthusian theory.